The first time I noticed the paint, I thought it was vandalism. Not targeted, not personal, just random, because that's what it looked like. A bright streak of neon color sprayed across the side of one of my Beehive boxes, careless, uneven, like someone drove by and decided to leave a mark without thinking about what it was they were marking. At least, that's what I told myself at first, because the alternative didn't make sense. Who looks at a set of active beehives and decides to spray paint them? I stood there for a minute, just looking at it, trying to figure out what bothered me more. The fact that someone had crossed onto my property to do it, or the fact that they didn't even understand what they were messing with. These weren't decorative boxes, they weren't props, they were active hives. Living systems. Thousands of bees working in a structure that depends on stability, scent, and consistency. You don't just interfere with that and expect nothing to happen. But the hive was still calm. No unusual activity. No aggressive movement. Which meant whatever had been done, it hadn't triggered a full disruption. Yet. So I handled it carefully. Cleaned what I could without disturbing the structure. Checked the frames. Watched the bees. Everything looked stable. So I let it go. For a day. Then it happened again. Different hive. Same paint. Same careless streak across the side. This time closer to the entrance. That's when I knew it wasn't random. Because random doesn't repeat like that. Not in the same place. Not in the same way. This was intentional. Someone had seen the hives, decided they didn't like them, and came back. I didn't react right away, didn't call anyone, didn't escalate. Because before you act, you need to understand what you're dealing with. So I installed cameras, not obvious ones, just enough to cover the hives, the path leading up to them, and the edge of the property where someone would have to cross to get close. Clear angles. Night vision, motion alerts. Then I waited. It didn't take long. 2 nights later, just after sunset, I got the alert. I opened the feed, and there she was, standing near the hives, holding a can, looking around like she expected to be seen but didn't want to be caught. She shook the can once, stepped closer, and sprayed. Same motion, same careless line, like she was tagging something she owned. I watched the entire thing without moving, because now it wasn't a question. Now I knew. The next morning, I went over the footage again, clear enough to identify, clear enough to understand exactly who it was, and that's when everything clicked. She lived 3 houses down, part of the HOA. The same one who had complained about outdoor structures during the last neighborhood meeting. At the time, I didn't think much of it. People complain about things they don't understand all the time. But now, this wasn't a complaint. This was action. I decided to talk to her, directly. Because sometimes the simplest solution is still the best one. She answered the door like she wasn't expecting anything. Calm, neutral, until she saw me. "Yes?" she said. "I need to talk to you about something," I replied. She stepped outside, closing the door behind her. "What is it?" she asked. I didn't accuse her immediately, didn't show the footage, just kept it simple. "Have you been near my property recently?" I asked. Her expression didn't change. "No," she said. "Too fast, too clean." That told me everything. "I have cameras," I said. That's when the shift happened. Small, but real. Her posture tightened slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied. So I showed her. Just a few seconds. Enough. Her standing there, the can in her hand, the paint hitting the hive, no room for denial. She looked at the screen, then back at me, and instead of apologizing, she doubled down. "You shouldn't have those things there," she said. "Those things, not hives, not bees, just things." "They're legal," I replied. "They're dangerous," she said. "They're managed," I corrected. She shook her head slightly. "This is a residential area," she added. "And this is my property," I said. That was the moment it became clear. This wasn't about safety. It wasn't about concern. It was about control. She didn't like something, so she tried to change it, first by complaining, then by acting. "You need to remove them," she said. "No," I replied. She crossed her arms. "Then I'll take it further," she said. I nodded once. "You can try," I replied. That ended the conversation. Not because it was resolved, but because there was nothing left to say. She had made her position clear, and so had I. The difference was, mine was backed by reality. Hers was backed by frustration. I walked back to my property and stood near the hives again. Watched the bees move in and out, completely unaware of the situation around them, focused only on what they always do: work, maintain, protect. And that's when I made a decision. Not emotional, not impulsive, just practical. If she was going to keep interfering with something she didn't understand, I wasn't going to argue with her about it. I was going to let her understand it. the natural way, because bees don't care about HOA rules. They don't care about complaints. They respond to behavior. And if that behavior crosses a line, they respond accordingly. So I made a few adjustments. Nothing harmful, nothing illegal, just small changes to how the area was structured, how access worked, how close someone could get before they realized they were somewhere they shouldn't be. Then I waited. Because people like her don't stop after one warning. They escalate, they test, they push further than they should. And sooner or later, they cross a line they don't understand. And when that happens, nature handles the rest. I didn't change the bees. That's the first thing people assume when they hear a story like this, that I somehow made them more aggressive or did something unnatural to force a reaction. I didn't. Because you don't need to change bees for them to react. You just need to stop protecting someone from the consequences of getting too close the wrong way. Up until that point, I had managed everything carefully, not just for the health of the hives, but for the environment around them. I kept a wider buffer zone than necessary, positioned the entrances to face away from open paths, and maintained a calm, low-disturbance routine so the bees stayed predictable and focused. In other words, I made it easy for people to stay safe, even if they didn't fully understand what they were near. After that conversation with her, I stopped doing that, not recklessly, just accurately. I adjusted the positioning of a couple of the hives so their flight paths were more direct, still within my property, still compliant with local guidelines, but no longer angled away from the side where she had been approaching. I also removed a temporary barrier I had originally placed to keep casual foot traffic at a distance, something that had never been necessary for me, but it helped prevent situations exactly like this. Now, the space reflected reality. If you stayed where you were supposed to, nothing changed. But if you stepped closer than you should, you would notice. I also left the cameras running, because this wasn't about guessing what might happen, it was about seeing exactly what did. For 2 days, nothing happened. No movement, no late-night visits, no paint, which almost made it seem like she might have stopped. But that kind of behavior doesn't just disappear, it pauses. And sure enough, on the third evening, just before sunset, I got the alert again. I opened the feed. She was back. Same path, same direction, same can in her hand. But this time there was something different. Less caution, more confidence, like she believed the previous encounter hadn't changed anything, like the warning, the footage, the conversation. None of it mattered. She stepped closer to the hives without hesitation, walking directly into the area she had used before, not realizing that the small adjustments I made had shifted how that space worked. At first, nothing happened. The bees continued their normal movement, in and out of the hive, steady, focused, undisturbed. That's the thing about bees. They don't react immediately. They assess. She raised the can and started spraying again. Same careless motion. Same lack of awareness. The paint hit the side of the hive. And that's when the first change happened. Subtle. Almost invisible if you weren't watching closely. The pattern of movement shifted. Not chaotic, not aggressive, just alert. More bees near the entrance. More activity in the immediate area. A response. She didn't notice. Of course she didn't. Because she wasn't looking for it. She was focused on what she was doing, not what was happening around her. She took another step closer. That mattered. Distance is everything with bees. There's a threshold where you're outside their concern, and another where you're not. She crossed it. One bee circled her, then another. Still not aggressive. Just checking. That's the warning most people never recognize. She waved her hand slightly, irritated. Ugh, she muttered, brushing the air like it was nothing. That movement mattered too, because sudden motion doesn't calm bees. It signals disruption. Within seconds, the number increased. Not a swarm, not an attack, just a growing presence. Enough to be noticed, enough to change the situation. She paused for the first time, looking around. "What is this?" she said under her breath. Another bee passed close to her face, then one near her arm. Now she noticed. But instead of stepping back, she stayed. And that's where the situation shifted from avoidable to inevitable. She tried to finish quickly, spraying one last streak across the hive like that would somehow solve whatever she thought the problem was. But by then, the environment had already changed. The bees weren't ignoring her anymore. They were reacting. One landed on her sleeve. She froze for a second, then flicked it away. That was the moment everything escalated. Not instantly, but decisively. Because now it wasn't just presence. It was interaction. More bees moved toward her, closer, faster. She stepped back quickly this time, finally recognizing that something wasn't right. Okay, she muttered, backing away. But backing away late. isn't the same as staying clear in the first place. She turned to leave, moving faster now, her confidence gone, replaced with urgency. And that's when it happened. A sharp reaction. Sudden. Unmistakable. She flinched hard, grabbing her arm. "Are you serious?" she shouted, panic replacing irritation. Then another movement. Near her shoulder, another flinch. Now she wasn't walking. She was rushing, trying to get out of the area as quickly as possible, swatting at the air, no longer in control of the situation she had created. I watched the entire thing unfold without moving. Not because I didn't care, but because this wasn't something I caused. This was something she triggered, and the difference matters. She made it to the edge of the property within seconds, practically running now, leaving the can behind as she focused only on getting away from what she finally understood she shouldn't have approached. The moment she crossed out of the immediate area, the activity dropped. Not instantly, but quickly, because the threat had left. That's how it works. Bees don't chase without reason. They respond. Then they stop. She didn't look back, didn't stop, just kept moving until she was completely out of view. The entire encounter lasted less than a minute. Less than a minute to undo everything she had been doing for days. I saved the footage, every second of it, not for revenge, not for leverage, but because I knew this wasn't over yet. People like her don't accept consequences quietly. They look for someone else to blame. And this time, she wasn't going to come back with paint. She was going to come back with something else, something louder, something official. Because when people can't control a situation, they try to control the narrative. And I had a feeling that was exactly what she was about to do. She didn't come back that night, or the next day, which for a moment made it feel like the situation had resolved itself. But that kind of silence usually isn't resolution. It's preparation. Because people like her don't walk away after something like that. They regroup, they reframe, and then they come back with a different angle. That call came 2 days later, not from her, from the county office. Calm, professional, and very specific. "We've received a complaint regarding unsafe beekeeping practices on your property." I almost smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. "Yes," I replied. "They've raised concerns about aggressive behavior and potential risk to neighboring residents," the voice continued. Aggressive, risk, the words people use when they don't want to mention what they actually did. "I understand," I said. "Would you like to come take a look?" There was a brief pause, then, "Yes, we'll schedule an inspection." "Anytime," I replied, because this was exactly where the situation needed to go. Out of opinion, out of accusations, and into something measurable, something objective. The inspection was set for the following morning. Right around the same time the bees were at their calmest, when activity was steady but not heightened, the ideal window to evaluate behavior without interference. When they arrived, it wasn't just one person, 2 officials, one from the county, one with specific experience in apiary management. That part mattered, because this wasn't someone guessing. This was someone who understood exactly how beehives function, and more importantly, how they're supposed to be handled. I met them at the edge of the property and walked them through everything. The hive placement, the spacing, the orientation, the buffer zones, all of it. Clear, compliant, documented. They didn't rush, didn't jump to conclusions, just observed, watched the flight patterns, listened to the sound of the hive, checked the structure. Everything was exactly where it should be, stable, controlled, normal. "She reported aggressive behavior?" the specialist asked. "That's what I was told," I replied. He nodded slowly, still watching the bees. "They're not aggressive," he said after a moment. "They're responsive." That one word changed everything, because aggressive implies a problem. Responsive implies a trigger. "What kind of trigger?" the other official asked. The specialist didn't look away from the hive. "Close proximity, sudden movement, interference with the structure," he said. Then he turned toward me. "Has anyone been approaching the hives directly?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I pulled out my phone. Same as before, same footage. Only this time, it wasn't about proving trespassing, it was about context. I played the clip, her walking in, spray can in hand, standing directly next to the hive, applying paint multiple times, then the shift in the bees, the response, the reaction. The officials watched quietly. No interruption, no questions, just observation. When the clip ended, the specialist exhaled slightly. "That explains it," he said. The county official looked at me. "Do you have more of this?" he asked. "I do," I replied. "Keep it," he said. That was enough. Again, simple, clear, final. Because now the complaint wasn't just unsupported, it was reversed, completely. "She entered the hive area and disturbed them," the specialist said. "That's not a passive situation. That's direct interference." The county official nodded. "We'll note that in the report," he said. And just like that, the narrative shifted. Not because I argued, not because I defended, but because the truth was visible, undeniable. They finished the inspection without any issues. No violations, no warnings, nothing to correct. Because there was nothing wrong. The system was working exactly the way it should. As they were leaving, the county official paused. "If there are further incidents, document everything," he said. "I will," I replied. But I already had. That was the difference. When you wait until there's a problem to start keeping track, you're already behind. They left. And for the first time since this started, there was no tension in the air. No expectation of another complaint. No sense that something else was coming. Because everything that could be questioned had been answered. A few days later, I saw her again. Not near the hives, not near the property, just passing by on the road. She didn't stop, didn't look over, didn't slow down, and that told me everything, because the confidence she had before was gone. Not replaced with understanding, just replaced with silence, which was enough. The hives stayed where they were, untouched, unbothered, functioning exactly the way they always had, because nothing about them had ever been the problem. The problem was someone thinking they could interfere with something they didn't understand and not face the consequences of it. In the end, I didn't have to escalate, didn't have to argue, didn't have to prove anything beyond what was already there. I just had to let the situation play out and make sure it was seen clearly, because sometimes the most effective response isn't doing more. It's doing just enough and letting everything else take care of itself. How did you like the story? Please like, share, and subscribe my YouTube channel for more interesting HOA stories.